When the weather is at its worst, rescue swimmers get the call to action.
They can be the solution. When all else fails, a swimmer can make it happen.
It's in the back of every seaman's mind. The Coast Guard is going to be out there to help us, save us.
On this episode of When Weather Changed History, America comes to recognize the urgent need for a new kind of life-saving force.
Maritime reform often is written in blood, and it's often written during storms.
A disaster in icy waters serves as a wake-up call.
Of the 34 crew and officers, 31 died that night.
The tragedy forces the Coast Guard to rethink the way it saves lives in the water. These rescue swimmers are put to the test during the catastrophic Hurricane Katrina.
There's nothing you do in school that prepares you for the nation's largest natural disaster.
August 29th, 2005. Hurricane Katrina pummels the Gulf Coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Violent winds and a massive storm surge devastate New Orleans. In the wake of the storm, the Coast Guard deploys search and rescue teams. The Coasties, as they are called, include an elite squad, the Coast Guard Rescue Swimmers.
So it'd be easier if we put you in the water there?
For days, the rescue swimmers and helicopter crews respond to thousands of distress calls throughout the region.
It's turbulent up here. It's hard to keep this totally steady.
I swam up to the boat, got inside the boat. A woman, her daughter, and then the daughter's 4-month-old preemie daughter, and 3 dogs. And they were completely scared. They're shaking. She grabbed me, started crying, thanking me.
Day after day, they perform dangerous rescues, swimming in contaminated water or dodging power lines to pluck victims from unsteady rooftops.
As soon as I got on scene, I look at this man and he was just, get my babies out of here. The building started making all kinds of noises.
Rescue swimmer Israel Parker saves 9 children trapped in an attic. For weeks, they work around the clock.
That's all I can take there. I got 2 girls in here.
In temperatures near 100 degrees.
People were panicked. There was a lot of people that were running. They were just trying to get to the highest point that they could find.
During Katrina, rescue swimmers and their air crews are credited with saving more than 12,000 lives.
We completed every mission. We lost no one. We exceeded what I think the expectations were of our program. I guess you could say it was our finest hour.
This finest hour was more than 20 years in the making. Years of training and hard work pay off, especially for those who believed in the rescue swimmers when no one else did.
I shed more than a few tears during Katrina. Suddenly, all the effort and the years of convincing and cajoling and training came to fruition.
It is a rescue program that sprang from another weather disaster. One of the worst maritime tragedies in the nation's history, when the Coast Guard battled a ferocious storm only to find itself helpless to save lives. February 12th, 1983. A major winter storm is pounding the East Coast. Heavy snow and gale-force winds whip across the Atlantic Ocean. 2:51 a.m., the Coast Guard station in Ocean City, Maryland, receives a distress call. A ship 30 miles off the Virginia coast is in trouble. It's taking on water. The call for help comes from the SS Marine Electric, a refurbished World War II tanker that's badly in need of repair. The Marine Electric had set out from Norfolk, Virginia, a day and a half earlier, headed for Brayton Point, Massachusetts, hauling 24,000 tons of coal. The winter storm developed as the ship traveled north.
They were dealing with 20-plus foot seas. The winds also increased as well, gusting from 30 knots to 50 knots. This is a pretty severe storm, and they're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
But Chief Mate Bob Cusick wasn't worried. The Marine Electric had weathered plenty of storms. Plus, he figured help was just a call away.
It's in the back of every seaman's mind, hey, if this ship, anything happens to it, the Coast Guard is going to be out there to help us, save us.
Just 12 hours into the journey, the storm worsened, alternating between snow and rain. Gale-force winds sent tremendous waves up to 60 feet high, crashing over the rusted tanker. The Marine Electric took a pounding. The waves crashed onto decks riddled with cracks and onto cargo hatch covers that were rusted away.
I had laid down with all my clothes on, which I always do in rough weather. The captain came down and woke me up. It was around 2 o'clock, I guess, and said that he thinks that we're in trouble.
Now, as the captain makes the distress call, the Marine Electric is struggling. The bow of the ship isn't lifting properly.
The bow was riding far, far too low in the water. It wasn't coming back up and mounting the waves as the Marine Electric normally did.
The Coast Guard dispatches cutters and helicopter rescue teams. The chopper pilots fly into 50-knot winds. The Coast Guard also requests help from a Navy rescue crew based in Oceana, Virginia.
We got a phone call from the Coast Guard. There's a ship that is sinking, and they need us to support them to get people out of it.
Navy rescue swimmer Jim McCann is trained to save military personnel ejected from aircraft. He knows that if the ship goes down, the Coast Guard would be unprepared to help hypothermic victims in the water.
The Coast Guard at that time, all they could do was lower the basket in the water. They didn't actually have people to go in the water to do actual rescues.
McCann and his rescue crew quickly board a Navy helicopter and take off into the storm. 4:14 a.m., the captain of the Marine Electric makes a final distress call. The crew is preparing to abandon ship. They begin to lower a lifeboat into the water.
As we were lowering, the Marine Electric rolled completely down onto her starboard side in less than a minute. So no one got a chance to get into the lifeboat.
The World War II relic capsizes. Dozens of men are tossed into the icy waters.
In that sort of water, hypothermia generally will kill a person in 15 minutes.
There would be very little time to save the men, and the storm is not letting up.
It was still blowing extremely hard. The wind chill factor made it 15 degrees below zero on the surface. There were 20 to 40-foot waves.
The race is on as 34 men fight for their lives. Soon, the Coast Guard and Navy rescuers will also battle the storm to save them.
I knew I was going to hypothermia, but I didn't want to quit.
That's coming up next on When Weather Changed History. February 12, 1983, just after 4:15 a.m. Chief Mate Bob Cusick of the SS Marine Electric resurfaces into 40-foot ocean swells. His ship has just capsized on the Atlantic, 30 miles off the coast of Chincoteague, Virginia. Cusick loses track of time as he swims away from the ship's propeller.
I swam away for about maybe an hour, and I ran across a lifeboat oar, and I hung on to it. I didn't hear anybody crying or shouting. I was all by my own at that point.
Crewmate Paul Dewey finds an inflatable raft and struggles to climb inside.
But other members were unable to lift themselves up into the raft, and Paul Dewey was unable to pull them in because hypothermia had sapped their energy. So he watched as they, one by one, slowly drifted away.
Cusick happens upon a wooden lifeboat, half submerged under the water.
Luckily enough, it was low in the water, and I was able to get into it.
5:20 a.m. After battling gale force winds and flying blind due to blizzard conditions, a Coast Guard helicopter finally arrives on the scene.
What they see is not lifeboats floating neatly on the water. It takes a while for them to understand that the ship is capsized.
The Coast Guard rescue team notices a life raft. Rescuers lower the rescue basket. Seaman Paul Dewey, numbed by hypothermia, falls inside. After Dewey is pulled into the helicopter, he reports that no one else is in the life raft. The Coast Guard rescuers discover several victims bobbing in the water. They again lower their single rescue basket, but no one responds. If the men are still alive, they have been immobilized by hypothermia. 6:05 a.m. A U.S. Navy helicopter arrives on the scene. Unlike the Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy has had a rescue swimmer program in place since 1979. Navy rescue swimmer Jim McCann springs into action.
My job now was to get them out of that environment and get them to the helicopter so they could receive medical help.
The Navy helicopter lowers McCann into the water. He works with the Coast Guard helicopter rescue crew, placing victims in the rescue basket. All appear lifeless.
Nobody moved, nobody made a sound. I swam to the first gentleman, grabbed him by the back of the collar, leaned his head back to make sure he could breathe, swam him over to where the basket was.
McCann struggles in turbulent waters as he swims from one victim to another, unsure if they're dead or alive. Winds are blowing at 35 knots. The wind chill reaches -14 degrees. Rain is pouring down.
Waves were breaking over my head. The lens on my mask froze over.
For nearly an hour, McCann swims in 30-foot swells, pulling lifeless victims from the water and putting them in the basket. McCann himself is close to being overcome by the cold.
I knew I was going to hypothermia, but I didn't want to quit. I was holding on the basket as tight as I could so they wouldn't see me shaking, but I guess I wasn't doing a good job. So they pulled me in a helicopter, and the crew chief said, you're done.
Inside the cabin, McCann realizes there are a few survivors.
And the first time I ever knew there were even live people on board is when they brought me back to the helicopter. There was 2 gentlemen sitting in the seats in the aircraft.
McCann wants to continue the search and rescue mission, but he's shaking uncontrollably, and the helicopter is running low on fuel. The chopper pilot prepares to head for shore to get the survivors to a hospital. Then comes word from a nearby freighter. It appears there is another survivor in a lifeboat.
This boat's riding up and down in these waves, and somebody's inside the boat.
It is Chief Mate Bob Cusick, alive and clinging to a half-submerged lifeboat. The helicopter crew lowers the rescue basket.
The first one, he dropped the basket too far on the bow.
Cusick is unable to get in the basket. The chopper crew tries again, and this time drops the rescue basket right on target.
He dropped the basket on the seat right in front of me, and I flopped into it, and he hoisted me right up.
7 a.m. Bob Cusick is near death, and the rescue helicopter is low on fuel. They immediately head for shore.
Of the 34 crew and officers, 31 died that night. Only 3 survived. Bob Cusick, the chief mate, Gene Kelly, the third mate, and Paul Dewey, a seaman.
As soon as the news spreads about the sinking of the Marine Electric, investigations get underway. The vessel sank 120 feet to the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. It fell victim to one of the worst storms to hit the East Coast in 40 years. The severe weather delayed rescuers and hampered efforts to save the crew. After the tragedy, Congress orders the Coast Guard to enact tougher safety inspections and requires that all ships be equipped with survival suits. The Coast Guard also gets the green light to develop its own rescue swimmer program.
Maritime reform often is written in blood. It's often written during storms, and that's what occurred here.
Getting approval for a rescue swimmer program is one thing. Getting it off the ground is another.
The Coast Guard had solicited throughout the aviation community for volunteers, and not many people wanted to do that.
The Coast Guard sets up a pilot program at its air station in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. 5 young men are chosen to become the first Coast Guard rescue swimmers. Their leader is veteran aviation manager Larry Farmer.
To all the people that were interested in becoming a rescue swimmer, my first question would be, can you swim? And they would usually respond, why, sure. And then I would say, but can you swim with someone who is acting panicky wrapped around your head?
That's coming up next on When Weather Changed History. (1984), Pensacola, Florida. At the U.S. Naval Base, a small group of Coast Guard men embark on a journey that tests their physical and mental boundaries. They are training to become the Coast Guard's first squad of rescue swimmers at the Navy's grueling Rescue Swimmer School. Joseph Butch Flythe is one of the trainees who are pushed to the breaking point.
You'd wake up in the morning and pray to God that you'd get through that day. You'd be going all day, and you would drag yourself back and figure out a reason why you shouldn't quit.
For a month, the men undergo intense physical training like this in and out of the water. As leader of the Coast Guard's brand new rescue swimmer program, Larry Farmer felt he too should attend the Navy school.
If I'm going to lead this program for the Coast Guard, I can't ask my people to do something that I haven't already accomplished myself.
Farmer found the Navy training far different from his previous Coast Guard education.
No part of that training was being able to swim with someone wrapped around your head who was imitating a panicked survivor.
In November 1985, the Coast Guard rolls out its new search and rescue program. Taking its cue from the Navy, the Coast Guard revamps its rescue procedures, and it begins offering the use of swimmers to air stations across the country. But the stations are hesitant to accept the swimmers.
We were looked on pretty much, I think, as a piece of gear. It was met with some skepticism.
We went through a major convincing process that, yes, these individuals are trained and they are qualified to deploy alone from the helicopter. They're not going to get out there and become a survivor.
2 years after the program is launched, farmers' claims are put to the test in the icy waters off the coast of Alaska. December 10th, 1987, 3 p.m. Just off the coast of Sitka, Alaska, salmon fisherman Jim Blades is about to drop anchor for the night. Blades and his young son, Clint, have spent the day working on their 26-foot fishing boat, the Bluebird. As winter darkness begins to fall, Blades decides against navigating through the night. Instead, he anchors his boat in Sitka Sound, next to a reef. The winds have kicked up slightly, and the waters are choppy. What Blades doesn't know is that an emergency weather update has been issued. A major weather system in the North Pacific Ocean is crossing into the Gulf of Alaska and heading straight for Sitka. Coming up next on When Weather Changed History, Blades is in for the fight of his life, and a rookie Coast Guard swimmer gets a chance to make history.
It was a shot for rescue swimmers that was fired around the Coast Guard.
My very first heavy seas rescue. This was it.
December 10th, 1987, near Sitka, Alaska. Salmon fisherman Jim Blades and his young son are just settling in for the night on their small fishing vessel, the Bluebird, when a sudden storm hits. It packs a ferocious wallop with violent winds, heavy snow, and treacherous waves.
The sea state kicked up because of the winds, with snow coming in. They called it a storm of unforecast ferocity.
Blade starts up the boat's engine and heads out to deeper seas, where he hopes to find safety. But his boat is buffeted by the winds, and Blades becomes disoriented by the darkness and blinding snow. Just off the coast of Sitka, a large wave picks up the Bluebird and slams it into a reef.
His boat hits rocks on the bow, and he hits rocks on the stern, and he starts taking on water.
The fisherman moves his son from the bow of the boat to the cabin. Water rushes in below the decks. The boat is sinking. He radios for help.
Jim immediately calls the Coast Guard for assistance. I'm sinking. I need help.
7:36 p.m. A call comes into the Coast Guard Air Station in Sitka, Alaska. Rescue swimmer Jeffrey Tunks, a recent graduate of the fledgling Coast Guard rescue program, is stationed at Sitka.
The SAR alarm goes off, and it said that there was a boat sinking. And as I looked out the window, the weather had really deteriorated quickly. I mean, it was blowing out there, and you could see the snow coming in, you know, horizontally. And it was really blowing at that time.
Tunks has never been involved in an actual search and rescue of this magnitude. He grabs his gear, boards a helicopter with 4 other rescue team members, and they head out into the storm.
And the weather was getting worse by the moment. So we made our way out. We were flying up the coastline looking for these people. And the ocean was just a mess down below. There was frothy waves coming over on top of each other, probably looking at 25 to 30-foot seas.
The chopper is buffeted by the high winds. The pilot battles severe turbulence from wind gusts up to 40 knots. Blowing snow limits his visibility.
We had 2 highly skilled pilots, and it was taking all that they could to fly in this weather because of the strong winds.
Down below on the Bluebird, Jim Blades and his son prepare for the worst.
The Blades couldn't give an accurate position. They were disoriented by the storm, and that kind of messed things up in terms of the rescuers coming to the right location.
The helicopter crew struggles to find the sinking vessel.
One of the crewmen was able to spot a light that Jim was shining to say, "This is my location." And they started to make a turn to head towards that light. And right when they made the turn, a huge gust of wind came in and pushed the helicopter away.
pushed us 6 miles away from the vessel. That's how strong the winds were blowing.
Finally, through the darkness and snow, the helicopter relocates the foundering boat. The pilots radio the Bluebird.
We begin to call down on the father and tell him what we were trying to do, but this time he was very frantic. Water was washing over the vessel.
Fighting strong winds and heavy snow, the helicopter hovers 40 feet over the troubled boat. The team deploys the rescue basket, but the wind is buffeting the helicopter, and the boat is being tossed by the high waves.
We nearly got in trouble because the movement of the ship down below us was so erratic.
They couldn't get the basket close enough to the boat so that the blades could get into it.
We made several more attempts to hoist them from the boat and finally said, "We can't get you off the boat."
The helicopter crew radios Jim Blades and his son.
They asked the blades to get into the water, and by now the boat was sinking.
Blades and his son take a leap of desperation into the violent water below. The rescue crew drops the basket several times, but large waves keep forcing the father and son back toward the sinking Bluebird. They simply cannot make it to the rescue basket.
The pilots were at their wits' end just to keep the aircraft airborne.
There was a couple of times when the aircraft commander asked the crew, "I think we've done all we can do. Do you just want to toss them a raft out and let them try to ride the storm out?" And the crew said, "No, we're going to get them out."
The pilots are under orders to only deploy a rescue swimmer as a last resort. But by now, after numerous attempts to lower the basket, the search and rescue team has no choice. It's time for the rescue swimmer.
The pilot calls back and says, "Hey, Jeff, if we're going to get these guys out, I think we're going to have to put you in." I said, "Okay, I'm ready to go."
In his mind, though, he thought, this is insane. He was worried about not being able to save the father and the son. But because of his devotion to saving lives, he said he'd go, and he did.
Our very first heavy seas rescue, this was it. I was so focused on the man and his son, as I had been trained to do, that the fact of the ocean was as turbulent as it was, and it was just part of the mixture, you know, it was what we had to do.
In his first rescue attempt ever, Tunks is lowered by sling into the icy, cold, turbulent water. Just as his fins hit the water, the helicopter is blasted backwards by a violent wind gust. Tunks is pulled along with it.
The last thing I remember was looking down and seeing Jim and Clint right below me. The next thing I know, I'm bouncing off the top of waves, and the aircraft dragged me about 100 yards away from them.
When Tunks gets his bearings, he can see the helicopter has turned and is now shining its light away from him.
I knew then I had to go to that light. So I began to swim over the wave tops, and finally I saw him, and I swam up behind him and told him that I was a rescue swimmer and I was there to help them. And he said, "Good, you think they can get us out of the water?" And I says, "Not a problem, we do this all the time."
Jim Blades and his son are nearly immobilized by the cold. Tunks pulls them away from the sinking vessel but can't get them into the rescue basket. The wind keeps blowing it out of his reach.
Finally, on about the 5th attempt, I was able to grab the basket and roll them into the basket. And I immediately gave the thumbs up, and the basket just shot out of the water like a cannon. And it began to swing erratically under the aircraft. The pilot climbed, and the hoist operator finally got it up into the door of the aircraft.
When the basket is lowered to Tunks, he too struggles to get in. But before the chopper can lift him to safety, he's once again dragged across the water.
I crashed into one wave that was so strong that it ripped off my mask and snorkel. I was hanging on so tight to the basket that after the flight ended, I noticed that I had brown spots on each one of the tips of my fingers. They were bruises from gripping on so tight.
Within 10 minutes, the chopper lands at Air Station Sitka. Tunks is honored for his bravery. His rescue is a critical turning point for the Rescue Swimmer program.
Jeff Tunks' rescue was phenomenal. It was a shot for rescue swimmers that was fired around the Coast Guard.
Jeff's case turned the future of the swimmer program around. Instead of being the swimmer, it became my swimmer. They became a resource that was so valued that they were sent out for just about everything and anything.
The Rescue Swimmer program takes off. By 1991, the Coast Guard Rescue Force expands to include 300 swimmers at dozens of stations across the country. Coming up next, Coast Guard swimmers face a disaster like never before when Hurricane Katrina tears apart New Orleans.
It's flooded for miles and miles. To see their home city in that condition, it brought a lot of them to tears.
The whole city is pretty much underwater. You looked for the rooftop with the most women and children or disabled people, and you started.
August 29th, 2005, the Gulf Coast. Hurricane Katrina tears into Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Massive amounts of floodwater devastate New Orleans.
It just looked like somebody carpet bombed that place. Some places were flooded to the roofs. Other places were just flattened.
The storm surge breaches levees, flooding 80% of the city. It is one of the worst natural disasters in American history.
No one expected the amount of destruction and the sea of people that were stranded down there and trying to move that human sea to another place. It was just unreal.
In response, the Coast Guard deploys cutters and small boats and about a third of its aviation fleet.
Over 5,000 coasties from around the U.S. came in, surged into the environment.
Among the rescuers is Jeffrey Tunks. No longer stationed in Alaska, he flies in from Mobile, Alabama, into a type of rescue scenario he's never experienced before.
We train on the sides of the mountains out in Oregon and Washington, and we do heavy sea rescue, and we do rock climbing and those kind of things, but we never believed that we'd actually be flying into communities and going into the side of houses.
Coast Guard rescuers are among the first to arrive after the storm.
There were Coast Guard helicopters coming right behind the edge of that storm. And we started picking people off roofs. It was just an awesome effort.
The storm leaves thousands stranded. Rescue swimmer Joel Sayers could not believe his eyes.
There was a lot of people climbing onto the top of houses, climbing into trees, climbing on the top of cars. There was just so many. They were all over. There was more than I thought that were going to be in one small area.
The swimmers and helicopter pilots are in a completely new environment. As they fly in, they must contend with all kinds of urban obstacles.
There's a lot of things we had to look out for, such as antennas, towers, transformers, telephone poles, wires. You name it, it was there. You also got to consider the water. The water is polluted with everything. It's terrible, and I actually ingested some, and I wasn't right for a month.
They had to improvise day by day on how to rescue these stranded children and women and men.
You try to take a look around, see who's in the worst case, and try to pull them out. The problem was everybody was in a bad situation.
There's 5 here, and there's 5, I guess, on another roof next door.
Over and over, the swimmers are lowered to rooftops.
They lowered me down to an apartment complex. And we picked up a elderly lady and an elderly gentleman. And the gentleman couldn't walk very well.
The two are hoisted to safety, as are scores of children.
That's all I can take there. I got 2 girls in here. Roger.
For the children, it can be a terrifying experience. Chopper crews also worry about running out of fuel or space.
Yeah, we got a full cabin back there, huh? Pregnant lady counts as 2 or 3.
On her very first Katrina rescue, Coast Guard swimmer Sarah Faulkner is handed a young child.
I don't think I'll forget that first baby. I was so terrified of him starting to squirm or wiggle, and I'm already sick 2 stories up and have to go up 100 feet, you know, on a cable. I was holding on to him so tight, I had to check him to make sure I wasn't crushing him, because I was, you know, just holding on to him so tight. And he was fine. I don't even...
Coast Guard rescuers work 24/7 without rest.
Taking the load. Coming up.
They battle dehydration, performing rescues in temperatures near 100 degrees.
I just remember feeling so tired. You're moving that 1 foot in front of the other, and you just did it because you knew you had to.
20 years after Larry Farmer helped set up the rescue swimmer program, his son Jimmy now rescues Katrina victims.
There was no place, there was no hospitals or anything like that to take them. We were basically taking these people, dropping them off on an interstate.
The Cloverleaf, there's quite a lot of ambulances that are getting in and out of there. The Causeway and I-10 Cloverleaf.
The I-10 Cloverleaf interchange is on high ground and considered safe enough to drop off survivors.
We're not used to this. This is out of our norm. It wasn't your typical going out to an oil rig or going out to a boat and picking people up. It was definitely a learning experience for everybody.
Larry Farmer is proud of his program and his son.
He performed very well and was awarded an Air Medal for his performance. He and his crews were responsible for saving 54 lives.
Standardized procedures put in place by Farmer allowed all the helicopter rescue teams to work together.
Everybody knew how to do all the procedures the same way. It didn't matter if your pilots were from San Francisco or Traverse City, Michigan. They all knew what to do, they all knew how to come together, and they all were able to go in as a team and pull that off.
During Katrina, the Coast Guard saved thousands of lives. Rescue swimmers and their air crews are credited with saving more than 12,000 people.
In the span of 2 weeks, guys in there got to rescue more people than they probably will the rest of their career.
I guess you could say it was our finest hour. We completed every mission. We lost no one.
The Katrina experience proved to be a stunning triumph for the Coast Guard swimmer program that Larry Farmer helped create.
I never imagined we would see a rescue scenario such as Katrina, and that the rescue swimmer program would be so involved in saving people.
From Hurricane Katrina to fishing vessels in Alaska sinking, it's just amazing what this program has become.
Over the years, the demands placed on those who want to join this elite group have grown and are tougher than ever. That's next in the conclusion of When Weather Changed History.
The rescue swimmers have really become more or less professional athletes who save lives.
Elizabeth City, North Carolina. A new batch of young candidates undergoes rigorous training, hoping to become Coast Guard rescue swimmers.
We are putting them in a stressful environment. We are going to see how far that kid can push himself.
Every year, roughly 80 candidates are accepted into the program. About half of those will drop out. Those who made it through the program recall vividly their rigorous training.
I just wake up every day going, is this today the day I'm going home? You know, it's tough.
The physical training is just part of it.
Our swimmers are not only swimmers, they are also aviation survival technicians, which means that they are responsible for all the rescue equipment and survival equipment for all the aircraft at their air station.
Candidates also undergo emergency medical training.
You're taught basic life support, CPR, bandaging, how to deal with shock, how to deal with hypothermia.
And finally, candidates must pass a litany of exams that test all their training.
And then you get your wings.
May 18th, 2007. It's graduation day for the next batch of 6 Coast Guard rescue swimmers.
They have completed a grueling program, and we recognize those accomplishments.
The young guys who are coming in behind me will do bigger and better things than we did in the early days.
Like their predecessors, the new rescue swimmer will be highly trained, have a penchant for adventure, but most of all, the desire to save lives.
I think rescue swimmers love the adrenaline rush. They want to be in an extreme environment as much as possible. And their training allows them to do that and come out winners.
They join a group of rescuers that by 2007 has saved more than 14,000 lives.
Every life that you are going to save will be someone's father, mother, sister, brother, cousin, aunt, friend. One life saved affects many.
To save others, they risked their own lives in the most extreme weather.
Weather's role, for the most part, is what causes rescue swimmers to exist. The rescue swimmer is going into the usually worst possible conditions when no other aviation organizations in the world will fly. The Coast Guard will go out and attempt to rescue.
The swimmer program is the world's best. They've come so far in 20 years that they are recognized by other services around the world for their expertise.
It's been a wild ride, and I've been part of something big.
There's no better job to have other than, saving a life.